It's time to ditch toxic positivity in favor of emotional validation. This was printed in verywellmind.com, written by Ariane Renwick, published on November 1st, 2022. No matter how I curate my social feeds or dating profiles, it seems that never a day goes by without seeing good vibes only somewhere on my phone, expressed by one or more smiling people. I cringe every time I see that phrase, partly because of the statement is obnoxious, and partly because I harbor guilt at having once been one of those obnoxious people. It's no wonder that gratitude and positive thinking positively impact one's life, and it's been proven by studies again and again. When I wrote How to Be Well When You're Not, a wellness manual for chronically ill people filled with free and accessible tools for people to feel better, I reviewed countless studies about how much thinking positively can actually make for better health outcomes, and included numerous chapters of simple gratitude and positive thinking exercises for readers. My own journey through a half-decade of chronic illness was altered heavily by my shift in thinking. When I moved away from a mindset of anger and resentment over being sick into one of hope and thankfulness for the opportunity to restructure my life, it resulted in a huge step forward towards my physical healing. So I carried that thinking for years after achieving wellness, unaware of how fine the line is between thinking to improve your outcome and being intolerant to the real struggles of others. What should we be aiming for instead of emotional validation, and what does this mean? How do we make a change? What is toxic positivity? Toxic positivity is the maintenance of positive thinking, even in situations where it isn't appropriate. It often comes at the risk of denying our own genuine feelings or the feelings of others. When positive thinking in general is a great thing, toxic positivity is not. It's the act of denying that anything negative is actually happening, and can involve making people feel bad for having normal human emotions. It's rooted in someone's discomfort with emotions that are seen as negative, explains licensed therapist and relationship expert Inanka Vesley. It often comes at the risk of denying our own genuine feelings or the feelings of others. Good vibes only is only one example of toxic positivity, but there are other statements that are as emblematic of this harmful way of thinking. Someone practicing toxic positivity might say things like, "Everyone happens for a reason," or "Just look at the bright side." When a friend shares something difficult that they're dealing with, what is emotional validation? Emotional validation is about allowing people to experience their feelings and acknowledge that having negative feelings is real and even often important. Emotional validation is essentially the opposite of toxic positivity. This doesn't mean that it promotes or encourages negative thinking endlessly, though. Emotional validation is when you take the time to learn, understand, and accept the other person's emotions and experience. She notes that toxic positivity is a form of emotional invalidation, and that it denies the reality of a person's lived experience. Besson tells us that toxic positivity, the emotions like sadness and frustration, are pushed aside. Emotional validation is when you take the time to learn, understand, and accept that other person's emotions and experiences. Of course, you can't successfully do that if you don't allow yourself to experience the full range of emotions. Emotional validation allows you to have your feelings and sit with them for as long as is needed for you to move on. It's being true to yourself so that you can move forward in your life. Why are we so focused on positivity anyway? Even for those who've never heard of it before, toxic positivity hit the mainstream consciousness through the COVID-19 pandemic, when so many felt constantly upset or depressed. Recommendations to forget about COVID and enjoy life regardless set badly with those who had lost loved ones or suffered from the disease themselves. We've seen a rise in the awareness about toxic positivity as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thinking positively isn't new. The phrase good vibrations was popularized by the Beach Boys in the 1960s. But it was the rise of social media that led to the good vibes only movement, which is often centered around the idea of manifestation. Manifestation is the idea that you can bring your desires to life through the act of thinking positively about them and willing them into existence. It's the message of the law of attraction and has some pretty strong critics due to how it doesn't acknowledge the number of people born into difficult circumstances or who have challenging lives that are beyond their control to change. Because most people can't think their way out of poverty or sickness. Manifesting has come to be thought of as by many as an idea for people who come from privilege. Social media enforces the notion of manifesting through good vibes by depicting successful people who are usually white in settings like beach vacations or at expensive stores or studios. With the one-dimensional nature of social media, we only see the good outcomes and not the process or work it takes when people talk about manifestation. This depiction of manifestation leaves out the middle portion of actually moving on the belief. With the one-dimensional nature of social media, we only see the good outcomes and not the process or work it takes when people talk about manifestation. Practicing emotional validation. Practicing emotional validation is a healthier option for you and the ones you love. Luckily, it isn't all that difficult to do. Step 1, stop and think. When someone tells you about a challenging situation or when you've just heard bad news of your own, your instinct may be to respond right away. We have an innate desire to comfort those we care about, so statements like everything will be okay, or there may be a silver lining to this, can be quick to come out of your mouth. However, that might not be what the person needs to hear, and it makes sense to take a moment instead by briefly pausing and reflecting before responding to someone. Before responding to bad news or a friend's difficult circumstance, make space to just listen. Be open and know that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. The biggest step to take is to begin to acknowledge our own negative emotions and how we feel in a moment when they rise up. When we can acknowledge and accept our own emotions, then we can begin to do that with others, not the opposite. Step 2, acknowledge emotions. Once you've heard what's being told, the next step to avoiding toxic positivity is to just acknowledge the reality of the emotions at play. This can be as simple as saying, I understand you're really sad. She says we must avoid the desire to brush past difficult emotions. The act of offering your understanding is an empathetic one, and it shows your loved ones that we care about their feelings. Step 3, be supportive. Instead of telling someone to look on the bright side, or instead of urging yourself to just cast away your negative feelings, Offer words and thoughts of support instead. Let someone share how they really are doing and feeling. She suggests that you encourage them to be honest and reflect back that it takes insight and strength to do this. Making assumptions about someone else or telling them how they should think or how you think they should feel risks delving into toxic positivity. Instead, Manson says we should ask follow-up questions to better understand how someone is responding to a situation instead of assuming you know how they're doing. Step 4, validate. The final step is a straightforward one. You want to validate the emotions being experienced. They're validating statements that can be used that many people respond to well. These include, "That sounds really hard. I can see why you'd feel that way. I feel the same way." Or even, "I'm here for you." Let someone know you respect what they're moving through and that you're here to support them in whatever ways they need. It's something you have to move through, and that's going to take time. Whatever you're feeling is temporary, and allowing yourself to feel it will help you get through it. Toxic positivity has become prevalent, and you may know people who dismiss your negative experiences with statements like, "Well, you should try to see the bright side," or "You're too sensitive." Know that this may be invalidating behavior, and it's important to recognize that all your feelings are valid, whatever they are.